Okay, let's get into this.
Yeah.
What if something you do every day, something you think is totally safe, maybe even, relaxing, what if that's actually one of the riskier things you could do? Especially at a certain time and as you get older. We're talking about
Okay.
taking a shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, a shower. But for seniors, anyone over 70, really, the sources we looked at are saying that showering between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. is way more dangerous. The risk of accidents apparently jumps dramatically, like by 80%.
Yeah.
That's huge.
80%. Yeah. It's a pretty chilling statistic, isn't it? It really shows how these everyday things we don't even think twice about can have these hidden risks, especially when you factor in age and, timing. A shower just doesn't feel like a danger zone.
Right. It seems completely backward. So a listener sent us a whole load of material, really fascinating stuff, though maybe a bit alarming too. It digs into why those specific early morning hours are so dangerous for older adults.
Yeah.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to pull out the really key insights from all that. The reasons this window is risky, backed by the research and some real stories, and crucially, what you can actually do about it for yourself or, for parents or relatives.
And that specific time frame, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., that's really the crux of it. It seems that during these hours, a bunch of things line up, stuff happening inside the body, but also in the environment, like the bathroom itself. The sources sort of paint this picture of several vulnerabilities hitting all at once.
Okay, let's unpack that convergence then. The first big thing the sources zero in on seems pretty fundamental is unstable blood pressure, right around that time.
Exactly. Research from places like Harvard Med School, it points to this 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. slot as when our blood pressure regulation is, well, kind of all over the place. It ties into something called the morning surge.
Ah, the morning surge, I've heard of that. So your blood pressure dips overnight, then shoots up pretty fast when you wake up.
That's the one. And one researcher of the sources cite, Dr. Richard Thompson, he calls these hours a perfect storm of physiological vulnerabilities. Your body's basically shifting gears from rest to activity, and that quick blood pressure change, plus things like standing up in a warm shower. It can be a lot.
And this isn't just theoretical, is it? The sources shared a story about Stanley Peterson, 75 years old. He sadly died after his usual early shower, right in that time window. It really brings it home.
Absolutely. And it's not always fatal, but, serious injury is a real risk. There was another case, Doris Williams, 72, took her shower around 6 a.m., got suddenly dizzy, fell, fractured her hip, and her doctors apparently linked it straight back to that unstable blood pressure during her shower time.
Wow. Okay, so based on that risk, the morning surge, the instability, what's the practical advice? What do the sources say to do?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. Shift the shower time. The strong recommendation is to aim for mid-morning, maybe between, say, 10 a.m. and noon. That's when the body's systems, including blood pressure, tend to have settled down a bit. They're more stable.
Okay, later shower for better blood pressure. Makes sense. But there was another physical challenge mentioned, also riskier in the morning. Something about temperature.
Right. Yeah, another piece of that perfect storm. There's a report mentioned, American Journal of Geriatric Medicine, I think. It highlights how older adults over 70 often have more trouble regulating their body temperature effectively.
I knew that could make people feel dizzy in the heat, but how does the early morning make that worse?
Well, the interesting thing is, your core body temperature is naturally at its lowest point in those very early hours. So stepping into a hot shower then creates a much bigger, more sudden temperature shock than it would later in the day.
Ah, okay. So you're going from your coldest point to sudden heat. Yeah, that sounds like a jolt.
It really is. Dr. Amanda Chen, a specialist they quote, explains it puts this significant strain on the cardiovascular system. And for a lot of older bodies, especially starting from that lower temp baseline, it's too much to handle safely.
And that story about Albert Reynolds, 83 years old, that really illustrates it. He had a near-fatal heart issue, and they traced it back specifically to the temperature shock from his early hot shower. Combination was the trigger.
Which leads to another really crucial safety tip from the sources. Turn down the heat. They strongly suggest keeping the water lukewarm. Think 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and maybe install an anti-scald device too, just as a backup. That sudden spike in temperature is a real danger.
Lower temp, check. Later time, check. Okay, but the sources found another potential issue lurking in the morning routine, this time related to medications.
Yes, this is a really important one. Cardiologists like at the Mayo Clinic and experts like Dr. Michael Ramirez, they warn about the timing of common blood pressure meds.
Oh, wait, the timing of the pill matters in relation to the shower.
Absolutely. A lot of these medications are actually designed so their peak effect hits in the early morning hours. So if you take your pull right before your early shower, you could be stacking the drug's blood pressure lowering effect right on top of everything else that's going on.
And that creates, didn't the sources call it a dangerous double drop?
That's the term they used, yeah.
Yeah.
The medication pushes your pressure down. Standing in the shower can make blood pool in your legs, dropping it further. If it dips too low, especially with that morning surge stuff happening too, you might not get enough blood to your brain. Dizziness, fainting, and fainting in a shower stall, that's incredibly dangerous.
The example of Patricia Sullivan, 76, really showed this, didn't it? She kept getting dizzy in her morning showers, couldn't figure out why. Turned out it was happening right when her blood pressure meds were kicking in strongest. They adjusted the timing, problem solved.
It's a really strong reminder to talk to your doctor about this stuff. Medication timing. The sources are super clear. Unless your doctor says otherwise, don't shower within about 2 hours of taking blood pressure meds. And maybe even make a little chart. Keep track of when you take what.
Okay, so we've covered the internal body stuff.
Yeah.
But what about the bathroom itself? The sources said it's just inherently riskier at, say, 5 a.m.
That's right. And a huge part of that is just light, or the lack of it. The National Institute on Aging has studies showing that for seniors over 70, perceptual abilities, especially seeing contrast, can drop by like 60% in low light.
60%.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, I guess telling the difference between the edge of the mat and the floor gets harder in the dim light as you age.
Exactly. And bathrooms are already kind of tricky, right? Wet floors, slippery surfaces. But if you can't clearly see that puddle of water or the edge of the tub because your contrast sensitivity is down in the pre-dawn dark, well, the risk of a slip or fall just shoots way up.
Dr. Sarah Johnson, I think she was a geriatric ophthalmologist. She specifically talked about how tricky bathrooms get visually when the light's low and eyesight isn't as sharp.
Yeah, and think about Gregory Harrison, 81. He fell, broke his hip, pre-dawn shower. He said later he just flat out didn't see the water on the floor by the tub. It just blended in with the tile in the dim light. He was sure he would have seen it later in the day.
So the fix for the low light problem. What did the sources recommend?
Two pretty simple things, really. Motion-activated nightlights, stick them in the bathroom, maybe along the hallway too. And second, make sure any non-slip mats you use are bright, contrasting colors, easy to spot, even when it's not fully light yet.
Good tips. Okay, another physical thing, often overlooked apparently. Hydration. How does that factor into early morning shower risk?
Oh, absolutely. Specialists at Johns Hopkins and experts like Dr. William Parker, they point out that we're often a bit dehydrated first thing in the morning. Makes sense, right? You haven't had anything to drink for hours overnight.
And combining that dehydration with standing in a warm shower, I'm guessing another potential blood pressure drop.
You got it. It significantly bumps up the risk of orthostatic hypotension. That's the sudden, nasty drop in blood pressure when you stand up.
Because the blood sort of pools in your legs, reducing flow back up.
Precisely. So if you're already a little low on fluids from overnight, and then you add the effects of the shower's heat and just standing there, the risk of getting dizzy or even passing out because not enough blood is getting to your brain is much higher, especially in the morning.
Leonard Sullivan, 77, experienced exactly that, right? Generally felt okay, but kept getting dizzy spells in the shower.
His doctor figured it was morning dehydration. The solution was just drinking a glass of water before showering. And that's the clear advice here from the experts. Drink a full glass of water maybe 15 minutes before you get in the shower. Make it a habit, really, no matter when you shower, but it's extra important in the morning.
Okay, internal factors, environment, meds, hydration, covered. But the sources also raised a pretty sobering external point. What happens if you do fall early in the morning?
Yeah, this came up in emergency medicine reports they cited. It's critical. If you fall during that early 4 to 8 a.m. window, you're apparently about 40% less likely to be found quickly enough, compared to falling later in the day, that is. Less likely to get help in time, less likely to survive without serious complications.
40% less likely. That's huge. Why is that specific time so much worse for getting help?
Well, Dr. Emily Rodriguez, an ER doc specializing in geriatric trauma, she points out the obvious, really. During those pre-dawn hours, most people in the house are asleep. Family or neighbors aren't doing their usual check-ins yet.
So if you fall and you can't get up or call out, you could be lying there for hours.
Exactly. And that delay cuts into the survival golden hour after a bad fall. Just makes everything worse. Lying on a cold, wet bathroom floor, risk of hypothermia goes way up. And if you can't reach a phone or an alert button, you're just stuck.
That story about Beatrice Harper was just awful. 73-year-old widow fell during her 5 a.m. shower. Wasn't found for nearly 4 hours.
4 hours. By then, she had severe hypothermia, made her recovery much, much harder. Her doctors felt if she'd had showered later, the outcome could have been very different.
Which makes the advice here absolutely vital. What did they recommend?
Number one, get a waterproof emergency call button and put it in the shower area somewhere you can reach it, even if you're on the floor. And second, if you absolutely have to shower early, set up a system, a scheduled check-in call with family or a neighbor right after you should be done.
Okay. One last factor the sources highlighted, linking back to the morning vulnerability. This one's about brain function.
Yeah, neurologists from Stanford, I think, and experts like Dr. Jonathan Miller, they note that for seniors, cognitive function is often actually at its lowest ebb between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m.
Lowest. How much lower are we talking?
Studies suggest things like reaction time can be slowed down by as much as 30% compared to, say, midday. Your ability to process things quickly, make split-second decisions, react, it's just not as sharp.
And why is that specifically dangerous in a shower setting?
Because showering, even though it feels automatic, actually requires a fair bit of vigilance, doesn't it? You might need to react fast if the water suddenly gets too hot, or if you feel yourself slipping, or lose balance for a second. If your thinking is a bit foggy and your reactions are slower during those early hours, you're just less equipped to handle those little things safely.
The example of Franklin Wilson, 79, was pretty scary. Severe burns from his 6 a.m. shower.
He said the water temp change suddenly got scalding hot, and he just couldn't react fast enough to adjust it or get out of the way. He felt like his brain, wasn't fully online yet, as he put it. Knew he'd have reacted quicker later.
Which circles back to the timing recommendation, but adds another layer.
Yeah. Right. Aiming for that 10 a.m. to maybe 2 p.m. window not only helps with blood pressure and temp regulation, but it also aligns with when cognitive function is generally better. And the sources also suggested something simple. Use a shower timer. Just limit the overall time you're in there when maybe you're not at your sharpest.
Okay, so pulling this all together,
Yes.
the sources are really showing us is that those early morning showers, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., for folks over 70, they aren't just risky because of one single thing. It's this unique pileup, this convergence of multiple issues all happening at once. You've got the unstable blood pressure, the body temp regulation challenges hitting when you're coldest, medication peaks, really poor vision and low light, morning dehydration making falls more likely, slower emergency response if something does happen, and even reduced cognitive sharpness.
Wow, it's exactly that layering effect. Any one of those factors might be manageable on its own, but when they all hit together in that specific time window, that's when the risk really multiplies.
But, and this is the really powerful part of this deep dive, based on the sources, well, the risks are definitely real and pretty significant. They're not unavoidable. Simple changes, things you can actually do, changing the time, turning down the heat, drinking water first, being smart about meds, making the bathroom safer, getting an emergency button, having check-ins. These things can make a huge difference.
Exactly. This knowledge really gives you power, doesn't it? Power to look at this everyday habit and see the potential hidden dangers, and then take steps to protect yourself or protect the older people you care about.
So when you really think about it, this complex mix of unstable body systems, environmental hazards, potential delays in getting help, and just not being mentally quite as sharp, all peaking between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. Is the convenience of getting that shower out of the way early really worth exposing yourself, or someone you love, to that unique combination of risks? That's the question the sources really leave us with, and hopefully this conversation helps you answer it.